So yeah, hi, my name's Matt, and as mentioned, I am a Pluralsight author, and given this was meant to be a 5-minute lightning talk, I'm going to go a few minutes over though, I reached out to Pluralsight and I said, hey, can you give me 5 30-day trial codes? And so in the interest of learning and giving back, if 5 people would like to have access to the platform for 30 days, come and find me today, tonight, tomorrow, wherever. First 5 in, best dressed. So that's my little giveaway. Now the title of this is Keep Your CI/CD Dry with GitHub Reusable Workflows. Now I picked on GitHub specifically because we're working a lot with customers who are starting to use GitHub or are moving to GitHub, but as with all of the lovely things in our field, I want you to try and take away the patterns and the concepts, not specifically with GitHub, because this stuff applies to a lot of the tooling for CI/CD. So with that, I wanted to start with what I see a lot typically when we pick up a new customer or work with a customer, and they've got a GitHub repository, and inside of that, let's say they're a .NET shop, but it doesn't matter too much on what language it is, so again, apply that to your own thing. And within this repository, they've got their .NET application, and of course, they want to do a build and release of that. So they'll go ahead and create a GitHub Actions workflow, and inside of that, they've got, they're doing a build, a restore, they're doing testing maybe, and they're doing their release, so on and so forth. Pretty straightforward. And then what happens is they get a second application come along. Maybe they're doing microservices. Here it comes. And they're spinning up a second .NET application or whatever language. And over there, they need a build and a test and release and so on and so forth. So what do? They come to the first one, open up the workflow file, Control-A, select all, Control-C, move over there, Control-V. Change the version of .NET, maybe change the path to the solution file or the project that's being built, and job done. And then after a while, that happens. Maybe not to that extent, depends on your organisation, depends on the customers you're working with, so on and so forth. But especially if they're doing microservices and mono versus multi-repo aside for now, we tend to see some stuff like that. And then what happens over time from there is some things change. So up the top left and in the top middle, maybe this one up here in the top left is just a quick proof of concept and the devs just want to do a quick build and release and they haven't done testing yet or they haven't written the tests. They always come back and we'll write the tests later, right? That always happens. And the one in the middle there, maybe they're just doing some integration testing. And then down the bottom there in the middle, maybe that team has started looking at putting security scanning in and they've got unit tests and integration tests as well. My point here is that most of this is still pretty much the same, but there are some subtle differences that tend to happen over time. And obviously there's a lot of repetition going on here, and there's some problems with this pattern as well. So what if it looked something like this? These are our .NET repositories here, that we were just looking at before. But what if we were to spin up another repository there on the right-hand side? And inside of that repository, we have a GitHub Actions reusable workflow file. As per the name, this is something that we can reuse from all of the other repositories. So inside of that, now I've just pictured one workflow file here, but this could be many, by the way. You can make this reasonably modular. But inside of that, that's where all of the effort goes, to checking out the code, getting .NET set up, doing your restore and your build and your testing, publishing your tests and publishing your app, so on and so forth. And then what you can do from there is in your GitHub repository where your .NET application is have a caller workflow file. And that's usually got very little logic in it, but you can still have logic inside of there. But at the end of the day, all that needs to do really is call that reusable workflow to go and action these steps. And then from all of these other repositories, you can follow that same pattern. So instead of having each repository with its own workflow file that's got all of the logic in it, you can still have your triggers and that inside of your GitHub repository where your application lives, but it's just calling the reusable workflow to go and do all of the actual work that you want. So why would this be of interest? And the first and the obvious one is to get out of the duplication that I mentioned at the start and follow that don't repeat yourself or the dry pattern. What this leads to, that I've seen a few times, is that you start building a central library of approved workflows. So again, depends on your company, culture, all that sort of thing. But if you've got something like a centre of excellence, they can potentially now sit there and put all of the the effort into writing good reusable workflows and then just make them available to the developers. And now suddenly you've got developers that don't have to worry or think too much about the build and release process. They can just consume these reusable workflows from their own repositories. It also means that you kind of naturally get into a pattern where you build flexible and well-designed workflows as well, because like we saw when I had those 6 repositories on the screen, they were all kind of doing the same thing, but there were a few that needed differences. So in your reusable workflows, you need to allow for that as well. You need to allow for different conditions, different developer requirements, and so on and so forth. And you can do that by being able to pass through inputs and secrets from the main caller workflow. So some terminology, sorry. The ones that are in the repository still with your .NET application are referred to as caller workflows with GitHub Actions, and the reusable referred to as called workflows. So from your caller, you can still say, hey, maybe you've got an input that says run unit tests, and that's a Boolean, true or false. And you pass that through to your reusable workflow, and that then has a condition inside of that to run unit tests or not. So you can create this flexibility. And going back to, where's Dylan? Is he around from his talk this morning? Over there. So you said something this morning, and I think it was layered tests potentially is what you spoke to. And it actually kind of reminded me, when we've got that reusable workflow, that kind of feeds into the pattern that Dylan was speaking about as well, and being able to only run the tests that you really need to for that commit or that change that's gone into the repository. So just a different way of thinking, and hopefully that's resonated with everyone. That's my little ramble for some things that I've seen recently with customers that start to annoy me. So my main takeaway for you is, if you haven't already, if this was something new to you, I hope it was. I hope a few people have learned something. So my main takeaway is start templating and reusing your workflows or your pipelines. Even if you've only got 1 or 2 of them, I promise you the payoff will be there at some point in time. And with that, thank you very much.